raising 4 kids together, and we have a lot of stories to tell, things that we would do over again, a lot of things we wouldn't do over again.
Yeah, a lot of war wounds over the years,
Yes,
right?
for
So
sure.
so there you go. I mean, explain maybe just to get started, like this whole idea of realign. I mean, where does this come from?
Well, we found that over the years that if we could just get on the same page with one another, everything was infinitely easier. It was when we found ourselves being on different pages, and quite honestly, sometimes we weren't even in the same book. Sometimes we weren't in the same library, like we weren't on the same planet. So, um, being on the same page, like that's a pretty particular place, like to be on the same page
Yeah.
as one another. And think about all the different areas of life too. It's not just business. When you are married to your business partner, you've got business, you've got family, you've got kids, you've got um, all of these external things, and we have different conversations as life partners, as business partners. So I'm going to guess that a lot of you are having different conversations too. I mean, think about, if you have a conversation during the day at work that doesn't go so well, date night doesn't go really well. That's not true when you're talking about another team member, right? You have a bad conversation at work, you can leave it at work. That doesn't work the same when you're married to your business partner. So, just a little bit of background, like Seth and I, we both come from broken homes. We don't come from a place where we had models on how to do marriage or how to do business, and certainly not how to do those two things together and how to do them well.
And then we ended up in an industry that I think by and large will take a toll on your relationship, even if
Yeah.
you went into it with a full tank of gas. This one might leave you on empty a little bit, and
And
it's been a journey.
20 years ago, when we got into business together formally, we were searching out other couples that were working together. And it was surprisingly hard to find couples that were working together and also that would share really authentically and honestly about what was going on behind the scenes. Because up front, everything looks great, because when you're a business owner, everything always has to look great. Otherwise, how are you going to generate referrals? Why would people give you more business if they think you're a mess?
That's probably the loneliest part. And if you're watching this right now and your relationship is in a great spot, awesome. Honestly, throw a Zoom next week. We want to be on your Zoom. This will be more the Zoom of like when things actually felt at their worst, and some of the tools that we use to get out of it. Because when you're in a business and you work together, it's really hard to know who can you actually talk to about this. I mean, the therapist kind of understood. They understood like relationship dynamics, but they definitely didn't understand the dynamics of working together at a high level. And then the business coaches didn't really want to be marriage therapists, which I respect. And then you couldn't really talk to your team about it because it's a little bit like arguing in front of the kids, and you definitely couldn't talk to your clients about it. So it's like, what environment would you
Where do you go?
where do you get into? So,
And it's typical in any relationship to get in the same ruts in conversations. Like, well, I do this, and then you say this, and then I say this, and we all have our little dances that we get into. And if we want a different result, we have to have different conversations. So
yeah.
everything that we're doing today and everything that we're about really is, how do you have a new conversation so you can get a new result? Because if we keep doing things the same way over and over again, they disintegrate. So that's really our gift to you today, is really walking you through these 5 C's of getting realigned, getting back on the same page as one another, um, having new conversations so you can have a new result, a better result. Because I'm going to guess that you didn't get with your partner, that you didn't get married and say, hey, let's go live an average life. It's going to be awesome. You thought, you know what, together we're going to be better, and we're going to live a really big life. We're going to do some extraordinary things in the world. And then life actually shows up.
It does.
And it hits you in the face sometimes with things you just don't expect.
Yeah. So just for those of you, I see some names in the chat here that we know well, and we honor all of you for being here, and folks we've known for a while. It's fantastic. Just a little bit of background, right? So we are parents of 4 daughters. I didn't see that coming until it did, and it is amazing. So there's the family, and absolutely that's the big why. It's actually interesting because I honor any couple that decides to work together. because I know the freedom it generates if you are able to do it successfully, right? Like what it's able to create for a family that you could just pick up and go to a foreign country for a while. Or you like working together creates incredible freedom, and working together creates incredible stress. And it's like, I don't know, we've talked about it. Like if you're at the Olympics and you were a gymnast, but you picked a routine that had a really, really high difficulty level, like you might win gold. You also might just like totally fly off the high bars, and you might be a complete failure. And that's sort of what it feels like some days working together and trying to do life together. I mean, it's an adventure.
The stakes are high. The stakes are high. Now, the rewards are also really great when we can figure it out.
Yeah.
And when you can get on the same page together, when you can both be on that same page, I think everything is figure outable. So
I don't even know if that's a word, but I like it. I like it. Here's a little bit about kind of what our business world looks like. I mean, just a few of the things. So we started off in real estate. We started the Daily Group. That evolved into a brokerage. That evolved into some coaching services, services for agents. You wrote a book, Magic Mom, and Table Builders. Anything you want to share on any of those?
We've just got our hands in a lot of things, and 20 plus years into building all of these businesses together, we're just really excited to give back and really give back from all of the lessons from building all of these businesses, all of that they've taught us.
Yeah, yeah. So there's 5 things that we think about whenever we are having a rough time as a couple, and they've sort of evolved over time. We've called them the 5 C's, and we've given you images here for you to remember. But here would be the goal: if you got off of this call and you just remembered one of these tools, if you just found which tool might give our relationship and kind of sort of the space in between our business and our marriage just a little bit of hope or clarity or traction in this season, this is how we use these tools. So it's not one of those things that we always use all 5. It's more like we'll just sort of ask ourselves, what are we feeling right now? We'll try to diagnose it. And we found some systems over the years that have just really, really helped. And we can dive right in, but I mean, the reality is you see them on the screen, right? One of them is we think about a compass, and we ask ourselves, like, are we drifting apart? Is that the feeling that we're having right now? And if so, how do we sort of get realigned when it comes to our values? The car. I mean, how do you explain it?
Just want to dive into
it? No, all right. We'll
go to compass.
All right. So the compass. Are you drifting apart? Are we drifting apart? And how do we align our values?
And I think one important thing to note is that with drift is inevitable. So if you drift, it means you're alive, because things naturally will drift. It's how quickly can we come back together? Yeah,
I all I know is, I mean, I can think of a few distinct moments in our marriage. One of them was, let me just say it this way. I think it's often a shock to one partner in a way that it wasn't necessarily a shock to the other. I mean, almost by definition, somebody wakes up first and says, we're not aligned on this. Like, we're far apart. And I can remember one, I'm not even saying this is how it occurred from your side, but I can remember a plane ride where Alice and I are at 30,000 feet. And it's probably a good thing we were, because if I could have gotten out of the conversation, I probably would have. And it was just this very much, we're not on the same page. Like, we're not okay right now. And we haven't been okay for a while. And we have drifted further apart than you realize. And it's, I mean, probably appropriate that we are on an airplane. I mean, just imagine that idea of, like, you got 2 planes, they're going in the same direction, but they're just 1 degree off from one another. Autopilot kicks in, just like, I mean, autopilot in life. And you get a little ways down the road, little ways through the air, and it's like, where are you? And I feel like that's almost what it turned into for us.
Yeah, right? And I think for the other partner, it can feel like, how could you not know? This has felt awful for maybe a while, and we just haven't talked about it. So again, the missing conversation. What's the conversation that's not happening, that's allowing the drift to actually become worse? If you've ever been bowling where you've got bumpers on the lanes, like, that's kind of what this is. Like, how do we put some bumpers in place so we can still head in the direction that we want that ball to go, but like with some guardrails.
Yeah, I would write down the word burnout. If one of you, if you would identify one or both of you inside of your relationship as experiencing burnout, for me, that's usually when drift has gone too far in the business side, right? There, like I just think of emotions like overwhelm or feelings like overwhelm. Burnout is certainly like this. There's this extra crispy side, and what we had to do anytime we're experiencing that is we've got to find our way back to when we were in alignment. Probably one of the most helpful exercises in this whole process is this idea of gratitude. And because ultimately what you're trying to figure out is what did we used to value that we thought we kind of set the course, we went on this direction and we woke up and it's like, where are we? Right? And one of us generally is like, I hate where we are. And the other one's like, I thought we picked this path together. So if you find yourself in a relationship right now where you're the one that you woke up and you're like, I hate where we are, or you're the one that you woke up and you're like, what do you mean this isn't for you? Like, I thought we got on this journey together. It's like we've got to find the breadcrumbs all the way back to where did we actually start to drift. And that always brought us back to a place of we've got to talk about our values. And the reason I bring up gratitude is that's in a way how you source back to like, what do we value, right? You start to remember back, right? If we said, hey, take 5 minutes right now and just make a list of all the things you are grateful for in the last year. Make a list of all the things you're grateful for in the last year. You are going to, by just without even thinking about it, you're going to start to list what you value.
Yeah, because wherever you put your money and wherever your time goes, that's where your values are. So the easiest way we've found to do that is really just pick up our phone and scroll through photos. Like we tend to take pictures all the time, every day now, right? So I don't even remember like what I had for dinner last night. So do you think I remember what happened in January this year? Like that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So looking back at pictures and then looking back at the calendar, there are trips that we took. There are people that we met. There are great dinners that we had and experiences. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was this year. That was really fun. And it brings us back again to the things that really matter the most.
Yeah, it sounds too simple, right? But like
does.
we went to we did a staycation, went to the JW Marriott week and a half or so ago, and the first exercise we did, right? We had all these sticky notes. We wanted to do this, like, what are our goals for next year, and let's get our calendar. And we had budgets, and I had QuickBooks reports. It was amazing. And the first thing that we did is we just sat down with some sticky notes, and then with a journal, and we did this. We did this at happy hour at a bar. We did this at a couple different places, but we just said, what are you grateful for? Because in that process, you get this really pure look at what you actually value. And if you take the time to listen to each other, you're going to hear different sides of things come out. That was for us part of like the recalibration. Like I might say, I'm really grateful for the trips we took. And then Alice might say, I'm really grateful for the dinners we had at home with the family. Like, that sounds so boring. But guys, if you're going to stay in this together, you got to realize those are two sides of the container.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got to take that both of them are true.
Yeah.
Anything else on?
Well, just the values piece. The reason that the values are so important is because when you start to clarify those values, your decisions get to be a lot easier. But until we clarify what the values are, or I think we will often find that we actually have more in common than not. We just tend to focus in on the things that we don't like. So this is about, again, bringing us back to the same page. What are the things that we actually value?
If you need to do this, date night exercise might be go out, take a look at some of the high point moments of the past year with your partner, personally and professionally. Again, for us, it's pictures, because then the question that we would ask is, well, what about this picture, right? Like, I mean, if I went back to that picture of the family, it was taken in Spain at this garden in Valencia. And now if you said to me like, well, what do you value about this? Now we would start to, or what was so special about that moment? Now you start to get to value words. Then we start to write those words down and put them up on a sticky note, right? Put them up on the board. Once we start to get our values out there, we start to understand like, hey, our values are separate, right? You've got your values, I've got mine. But once we figure out what our values are, then we start to figure out what are our shared values. And ultimately, I mean, here's a great example. That picture for us represented freedom. Right? I mean, it represented a bunch of different things to us individually. We're trying to tell you right now what it represented to us together as a couple, right? Connection with our girls and freedom. Two things that we value in every area of our life. And we just needed to look at a picture and be able to sync back up on it.
And it helps us make future decisions too. Like the next time we think about taking, oh my gosh, this trip's really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's that memory worth?
So
we have a different conversation.
So there you go. So the first C that we look at is the compass. We use it when we are feeling drift. And from there, we have this conversation about, hey, what do we value? And we get it from the past to go towards the future. The second C, we'll take it away there.
So the second C is the car wheel. Does life feel bumpy? Does it feel turbulent? How do we set goals together, and what does that even look like? So there have been lots of times we've felt turbulence. We've felt a bumpy road, and if you want to live a big life and this car is going at a really high speed, that's when you're going to start to notice kind of like, ooh, I don't know with car terminology, but like little lug nuts are flying all over the place. I don't know. But when you pick up speed, like that's when you notice things start to fall apart.
Well, I think that's it, right? Like chances are, if you're watching this right now, we think that you move pretty fast in life. Like just the people we hang out with, the people that would have seen this on like our social media you're up to something big in the world. And you can't really remember the last time that life actually slowed down. Yeah. Right? Unless, I don't know, you had a flat tire and life forced a slowdown.
Which can happen.
Yeah.
Which can happen. So, again, you didn't get married to have this like boring life. You got together because you believed you could do something big. So something big that we did recently, like that has been a 25-year goal for us, was to buy an investment property in Bozeman, Montana. So Seth is from Montana. I remember going out there to visit you when we were dating, and like we're like, it'd be really cool to buy something out here. And every year it was like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. I don't know if we can do it this year. And this was the year we're like, we're doing it. And this property came up, and in terms of investing and in terms of net worth, it was a fantastic decision. Now, in terms of like monthly cash flow, not a great decision. And it actually caused stress on our finances because like all of these reserves that we built up that we had now invested into this rental property that are going to pay off now are causing a little bit like the world's now bumpy and turbulent when it comes to our finances. Yeah.
So it's like, on one hand, if you've had an experience as a couple where you're like, wait a minute, what? I thought that was a success. Like I put that in the win column, and then you wake up a couple weeks later, you're like, life just feels short. I mean, but this could be anything from like all of our kids got into the schools that they wanted to. And then that's amazing. Congratulations. High five. Put that on your success list. And then you wake up the next week and you're like, I am an Uber driver
in 4 different directions.
Yeah, like that's really hard. Or
it's real.
I mean, success for us, the move to Austin. Did that create turbulence? Absolutely.
For sure.
And so the reason that the metaphor of the wheel is helpful is because if we didn't have this metaphor, this is like a yes and metaphor instead of a let's compromise, right? Tony Robbins might have the best phrasing on this, right? When he says there's 2 goals that you want to have, or two attributes, the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. It's not choosing one or the other. If I had to guess, if they're anything like us, your couple also wrestles with one of you like plants a flag in the science of achievement and one of you plants a flag in the art of fulfillment. So I mean, we can go back to the rental property, right? Rental property. I'm like, this is a success. We bought a rental property. So why a couple weeks later, life is moving faster. We now have more doors and like that feels great and life feels turbulent. And it wasn't until we actually like went around the wheel. We looked at, I mean, just to give everybody kind of the metaphor, right? This would be an example of a wheel of life. And this is sort of this generic one across different categories. But imagine for a moment if the whole category here was financial, like, because you could do a wheel of life, not just for like your life as a whole, but you could take every slice of this, like the financial slice, and make its own wheel. And in that wheel, net worth would be like, that's going great. That wheel, we'd rate it as a 10. But we might look at the thing of like reserves or noise, just like the number of calls we're getting, or it's a new market, or red tape. The bureaucracy we're dealing with that property is stupid, right? That one caused problems. It caused turbulence. Whenever we have experienced turbulence, we don't, well, when we're at our worst, we blame each other. I mean, let's be honest.
100% true. Because it's really easy to go to, well, this is what you wanted.
Right.
You picked the property. You decided to go see it, and then you decided to make the offer, and I could make him 100% wrong for this. And does that really serve anybody at the end of the day? So all of these conversations that we want to have, really in all 5 of these categories, it's about putting the thing that we're talking about out here.
Yeah.
So that we can be on the same page. How do we get the problem to be something that we're both attacking together out here?
And a way to think about that with that investment property would just be, hey, no, that was good. It was a necessary part of the goal. It just wasn't the entire goal. What are the other aspects of that category that also needed to be true? So an example could be, stable cash flow, right? That's a great financial goal. So this one decision was great from a net worth perspective, was not great from a stable cash flow perspective. So what did we do? We sat down, we had a conversation. We're like, okay, we get it. We see the flat tire now. Yeah. We're not blaming each other for it. We just now know what our next focus needs to be to shore up that area. I think probably for a lot of our marriage, this showed up in things like, we would say things like, how's business going? And be like, well, business is going, maybe there's seasons where business is going great. But then we would look at like, well, how's the relationship with the kids, or how's time as a family? Whenever you experience like success in one area, but a lack of success in another, it's so easy to think, oh, I just picked the wrong goals. It's not how we see it. We see it as, no, you just need counterbalancing goals in this other area that are equally big.
And it's a wheel. It's in motion, and it's in very fast motion. So like we can make shifts and we can make adjustments. I think the problem for most couples is that we don't have this conversation nearly often enough. Most people I know, if they're even having this conversation, might do it once a year. Might.
Yeah.
And that's like, you would be in a very small percentage of the population if you're even having it once. But if you want to live a big life, it means you're having this conversation constantly and in different areas. Like Seth said, like pull out an area of the wheel. Like, what if you just did one wheel of life on relationships? What are the relationships that you guys have that you want to build out? What does it look like with each child? What does it look like with immediate family? What does it look like with extended family? What does it look like with friends? I mean, that's a whole deep dive in and of itself.
Yeah, it's very rare, my guess, as a couple, that you actually want different things.
Yeah. You're
just describing different sides of the same beach ball. Right? To mix so many different metaphors here. I could think of this related to kids, right? I mean, we could say like, do we want our kids to feel loved? Absolutely. Do we want them to feel, I mean, what you take loved and you go to an extreme and you eliminate other things, and then it'd be like coddled. Or do we want them to feel like we're giving them resources? Yes. But we don't want them to feel entitled, right? These are just all those phrasing is just when you fall off on the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. Do we want to be focused at work? Yes. Do we want to be workaholics? No. It's simply because we didn't counterbalance in another area. And when we consider a wheel, so 2 ways you could use it. Way number 1 is put all the different categories of your life on there, right? And you'll feel it.
And you do this individually first.
Yeah.
And then come together and do one together. And then you can start breaking it up and get really.
Well, when you notice an area of your life that you rated low, take the next step and draw a new circle and just put that area. So maybe you're like, business is great, marriage is great, finances are great, health is low. Maybe that's where you would rate right now. Perfect. Draw another circle, write health at the top of it. Make a few slices of the pie, and now start to fill in, what about health matters to you? I mean, here'd be some examples: sleep, movement, diet, blood work. I mean, checking in on levels, right? Those are all different categories of health. You actually might be like, oh no, I'm killing it on a couple of those. It's actually just this one area. And then when we do that in a season of life, we're like, hey, when it comes to health, for us to improve individually in this next season, or even collaborate together to improve, what's one slice of this that we can focus on? And it might be, better habits around meals, for example. Okay, so second C was the car wheel. The third C is the Clydesdale horses. Can you share the story? Like, I mean, when we put this up there, we were like, what are Clydesdales? That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen here. So what's the story of the Clydesdales?
Full horses. So the story of the Clydesdales is these are some strong horses, and one horse on its own can pull a good healthy horse can pull about 10,000 pounds. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Now you put two horses together, they should be able to pull 20. Now, the reality is two horses together can actually pull 24. Now, there's another level of this, that when the two horses are actually harnessed together properly, they can pull 32,000 pounds. The crazy part is
you sound like such a math biology teacher right now. I love it.
All
right,
so
go ahead.
Funny because I don't do numbers at all. If they're harnessed incorrectly, they won't even pull the 20,000. They'll pull under that. They'll pull like 15.
Yeah.
So when we were, running full steam ahead just as individuals, we get together, we're like, hey, like, I see something in you. Like, if we like join up here, I bet we could like pull that 32,000 pounds. And that's all we saw.
This is every couple that is watching
every
this, right?
Couple.
Like we know this is why you're together, is because you thought, I'm pretty awesome on my own, you're pretty awesome, but together, like we put our powers together in the universe, like the Avengers, I don't know what, or Clydesdale horses. We all think that we're better together.
Yeah.
So why is it that we wake up in a relationship a few years down the road and like, how in the world did I get harnessed to you? Yeah. Or even if you're not, even if it's not that verbal yet, it's like, why is it that there's so much friction between us? Like, I think you're doing your best. I think I'm doing my best. And I feel like together, when you add it all up, we're like
negative 73.
Yeah. Like we're not pulling 32,000 pounds together. We're not even pulling, 20,000 pounds or wherever we each ought to be the sum of our individual parts. We feel like we're pulling, 10,000 pounds between the two of us. Yeah. And when that happens, the image that we have is, okay, there's just friction, something about the way we're working, something about the way we chose to harness it up isn't working. Mm-hmm. And when the way you choose to harness it up isn't working, it's like, what changes can you make to reduce friction and to harness each other's strengths?
We both have superpowers. You and your partner have superpowers. And sometimes we look at the superpowers and like our greatest strengths can also be our greatest weaknesses. And if we can just get back to looking at, all right, where are we strong and what gives us energy, and we can each live in those lanes. Sometimes when we get together in business, usually it's one person that's in first and is doing it for a while, whatever the business is, and then partner joins. So in this case, it was like I was in first and you came and joined me. And I'm like, well, I don't like doing like this admin stuff, so why don't you do it? And that's a lot of times how husband and wives start working together, because it's like, let's keep the money, let's keep the pot within the family. So not it. Yeah. I don't want to do that thing. Why don't you do it? But the reality is, what if it's not your superpower either?
Yeah, yeah. It's and I'd be very curious. If I see some of the names on here of folks that run businesses together. I'm curious. Was one of you in first? I've actually never met anybody in this entrepreneurial sector that one wasn't in first and then somebody else joined, whether it was soon after or not. But it's like the default thing is you're like, okay, my husband just retired. He's joining me in real estate. What do I need done? I need a runner. That's, I mean, a common but not so brilliant way to figure out people's unique strengths.
Yeah.
Right. And wherever you are, it's perfect. The question is just, what could we do so that a year from now we are harnessing more of our individual strengths and we experience less friction and we're getting more results. So there's a lot of tools that we use on this, but the simplest and probably over time the most effective tool we've ever done is literally just we grab a napkin or a piece of paper and we draw 2 lines. And we know that the 2 lines mean this, but we'll show it to you guys with the red battery and the
version.
Yeah, you don't need fancy. You just need a piece of paper, 2 lines. But here's what it means, right? It means one on the bottom, $1 sign, to the top, $3 signs, like almost like effectiveness or value created, right? Not that the whole world is about, well, what does this translate into dollars? But in the business world, you really can say the more value you add to more people, the more revenue is generated, right? So just think about this, like, where do I add the most value from almost a quantifiable approach. And in theory, you could argue about that, right? No, I think that's more valuable. No, I think that's fine. You can argue or not. We certainly do. But the left or the right, you don't get to argue at all, because left or right is totally up to the individual.
Yeah.
Only I get to say what gives me energy, the green, and what drains my energy. Right now, I guess we get feedback from each other of like, hey, this is something I think you're really good at.
Yeah.
I would recommend that feedback instead of the, hey, this is something I think you're really terrible at. But when we usually have to go to our partner to say, like, what am I not seeing about myself? Like, where's my unique genius that I don't recognize? And the more you find yourself as partners being able to have great conversations, acknowledging what each other's great zone of strength is, the more you will help each other live in it. So how do we do this, sheet, right? If we mentioned burnout early on, this would be another thing. If you're experiencing burnout, if one of you is experiencing burnout, this is a great place to start,
because usually burnout is just, you're not doing enough of the things that light you up. You're probably doing a lot of the things that are draining your energy because you probably feel like they need to be done. So it's out of this almost like a martyr, like, well, these need to be done, so I'm going to go do them, even though they suck the life out of me. So just for a second, suspend judgment about what needs to be done and just think about, okay, well, if I could just live in my perfect little utopia for a minute, what are the things that give me energy? Forget even the dollar signs at this point. What are the things that give me energy? Like, is it being with people? Is it not being with, like, being isolated? Is it, do you like writing? Do you not? Like, what are the things that actually give you energy that you feel like time just goes by? And I didn't realize so many hours went by. How did that happen? So start with, what are the things that give you energy? And then you can look at, like, okay, is it a above the line there where it is something that could bring in revenue for the business if you do that thing? Or is it something that's like, well, no, it doesn't really bring in money, but I enjoy doing it, so it's more like a hobby? Again, no judgment, but let's just start with the things that bring you energy.
Well, and I think the creativity exercise, when we're in seasons where one of us is feeling more crusty and burnt out, and we were to do this exercise, we would start with the question of, what do you love?
What do you love?
What do you love? What gives you energy? What feels like it aligns with your purpose? For us, that is a right side of the page conversation. Then there would be a little bit of brainstorming or creativity of, like, how could that create value in the marketplace? I mean, let's be really clear. You love connecting people and throwing parties.
I do.
And it's possible to actually connect people and throw parties and not make any money from it. I mean, it could totally be in the bottom right quadrant of this chart. That is possible. That would be fine. You could write the word hobby in the bottom right of this chart. That'd be a good description of it. But what we found over the years is we'd start with the question of, okay, you love throwing parties, you love connecting people. How could that become the center of our lead generation strategy? So now questions like that start to live in the upper right quadrant, because you kind of paired lead generation, high value item, with something that you love, right? It's the first goal, of course, is to, as much as you identify what you love, to the extent that you could identify what drains your energy, what would be on the far left, and especially stuff that is on the far left and the far bottom, right? So the bottom left quadrant, those are the first things that we try to get off of each other's plate. Yeah. Right? I think also where harnessing comes in is, as a couple, if you can each do this chart individually, and one of you put something in the upper left, right? That would be something that drains your energy, but you know it's high dollar, right? You know it adds a lot of value, or it has high risk if it doesn't get done well. So it's upper left for you. If your partner put a similar thing, but they put it in the upper right, that's when you start to harness as Clydesdales together, right? Because and I mean, there's so many examples of this, right? It could be you're in real estate together, and one of you just decides, I really like working with buyers. The other says, I really like working with sellers. Great. Working with either one of those, high dollar. And if you can harness it that way, that's fantastic, right? You choose based on that. If you find out that it's like, well, neither of us likes working with buyers, now we've got to get a bit more creative. And there is an exercise for that. Is there any other examples for you of like how we would harness together things you like, I don't like, or even other ways you use it?
Yeah, I mean, will there be times you have to do things you don't like? Absolutely. I think the goal is to then have, I think harnessing looks like having the conversations around, okay, for us to both move into this spot of doing what we love, high dollar per hour, brings us energy. How are we going to navigate that? So what's the new conversation that needs to be had to be able to move us to that place? Because sometimes when you're in that top left quadrant, you do those things until you do those things until you earn the right to kind of, jump over to the other side. But hey, is there a way that we can have this conversation to create this pathway to that end?
Here's where there's a missing conversation. So let's say that early on in our relationship, hypothetically, we said something like, well, hey, taking care of the house. Hey, honey, doesn't really give me a ton of energy. It doesn't feed my soul. So all I know is it's not in the upper right for me. And Alice might have been in a moment there, been like, it totally feeds my soul. Like I want to take care of everybody, and that includes our family. And I love making home. I mean, yes, you've said this once. So then she writes it down, and it ends up in her upper right quadrant, right? And then we sign the piece of paper and we agree we're going to be doing it this way from now till forever. These things get renegotiated, and here's one way that you do it. If you ever found yourself saying, well, this is something I said I would do it. I liked working with buyers, or I said I would kind of be the one to take care of the house or take care of finances or whatever. And then you find yourself starting to get drained by something that you thought you liked. Go take a fresh piece of paper, put just that category at the top of the piece of paper. So
just taking care of the house. Yeah.
Taking care of the house, right? Now that's the entire box. Yeah. Now start to write out what is in the upper right of that, and especially what is in the lower left. Right? So just because you said, yes, I'll own it, I'll take care of home, for you over time.
I meant like hiring the interior designer and like redecorating the house. That's what I meant by taking care of home, not like doing the laundry, right? Like, so now we're like getting into the nitty gritty. Yeah. Like, what did I actually like? And what it actually drained me? Because then we have this big category. Or if you say like, well, I really love this thing, it doesn't mean like it's going to be like that forever. Yeah. Just because I liked working with buyers day one doesn't mean on, year 7 that I'm going to feel the same way.
But it was so clear, right? It's like you liked working with buyers. The more kids we had, the more the schedules changed, and the
Yeah.
less you wanted. Although you loved helping buyers and you loved meeting with buyers, you didn't love the frenetic nature of this house went on the market right now, and somebody needs to go show it to them in an hour, or it might be gone. And when that happened, we're like, okay, take a fresh piece of paper, draw the quadrants. Working with buyers is what would I really like? I liked the console. What did I not like? The frenetic nature of it. You hired a showing partner. Yeah. I mean, very, very simple way to do it.
So just a tool, again, to help you have better conversations.
Yep. There we go. Are we out of sync? A question we've asked.
Once or twice, sir.
Yeah.
37 million. Yeah. My gosh, we've got 4 kids and run multiple businesses, and the way that we see time is very different. Long-term planning for me is like dinner. That's like long-term planning for me. And for you, you're like, you're pretty easy, like with 5 years, 5 years out. Yep. And you're like, do you think we're going to run into some issues with Cadence, and how we navigate the world when we see things differently?
Well, and it's like, we actually realize we do want the same things. We are in the same boat, going in the same direction. We're in alignment, but dang, if the timing at which we want stuff is not different. Yeah. When you find yourself saying, now is a season to X, right? For example, if we pulled a couple onto this call and we said, all right, is now a time to invest and put all your chips out on the table, or is now a time to save? You might get 2 answers.
You probably get both. Do we want to take more time off this year, or do we want to double our income?
Yeah.
I mean, that one comes up all the time.
Yeah. So when you find yourself that you think deep down, I know we want the same thing, but there's still you still feel out of alignment, consider that it might just be, are we out of sync? In other words, is our schedule lined up that we want the same thing at the same time? Yeah. So where have you seen this show up?
I mean, as a mom, I see it show up all the time, because going like with the rhythms of the kids, like they're just in different seasons. There were times where it's like, I want to work all the time, and like kids' schedules won't, like, no, you know what? I want to be home a little bit more. Like, wait, but we just built this business so that you could go do all of these things over there. I'm like, I know, but I'm realizing that I'm missing time at home. I'd like more time at home. Or this goes vacations. We talk about trips, and it's like, well, I want to take that trip, but I thought that international trip was going to be next year, not this year. And you're like, let's do it this year. I'm like, but we want the same thing.
Yeah. And we found that, again, every one of these, we just discovered there was a conversation that we didn't know how to have. And we would start to blame each other for it when we're out of sync, and we'd start to like just argue over whose schedule was right. And instead we would find a tool, or we'd build a tool. And in this case, I mean, this was kind of the easiest one that we came up with. By the way, just to explain this, because it's might be a little hard to see or read, but all it basically does is it says, hey, what are the ranges of time going down the left side, right? Hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, so on and so forth. And then what are different categories? And where do these categories come from? Well, go back to the wheel of life, right? It's whatever categories you would write in. Don't use this one. Just grab your own blank piece of paper, right? But it's what are the categories that matter? And then what are ranges of time? And then we would just start, I mean, here would be an example. Alice, I really want us to go on a vacation, just us, a cruise, or go to Cancun, or just us, right? And the fact that you don't want that right now obviously means you don't care about our relationship, right? Not that I've ever said this, but if I did, here's what I would have been thinking. I realize that I'm just misdiagnosing the problem, right? Yeah. It's simply that we just haven't gotten into agreement of a rhythm. I might have in my head, we should go away once a quarter. And if your spouse isn't on the same page, not with the goal, but with how often that goal happens, how often it fits into the calendar, there's just space for a conversation. We see this show up with date nights, right? And there's lots of ways this would show up inside of our relationships. I mean, shows up everywhere. What are some other examples for you of like where you saw us not be on the same page and then kind of get back in sync?
A big one for us was, what do we do with profit from the business? You kept wanting to reinvest it back into the business, back into the business, back into the business. And there was a day that came that I'm like, hold the phone. Can we take some chips off the table? Like,
yeah.
When does that happen? And it was just a conversation I didn't know how to have, because I'm like, well, but what he's doing is good. And yet I was feeling like, but I feel like we should be doing some other stuff for our family right now, and taking some of these chips also. It's really easy for resentment to build up in situations like that when it's not verbalized.
Well, yeah. So if you think about it, we both shared the goal that we wanted to build a business. We wanted that business to generate revenue, that revenue turn into profit, that profit turn into net worth, and building equity in the business and building net worth as a family. Got it. So 10, 20 years from now, we're all on the same page of like, what does that vision look like far out? But then if you said the question like, well, how would we know we're on track a month from now? Did we take any chips off the table a month from now? I mean, obviously an extreme example, which we've lived sometimes, right? I mean, the number of years we didn't buy rental properties that I regret, like a lot of years, a lot of shame and guilt some days about that, right? But it's all because I had this long-term goal, like someday we'll buy more investment properties when there's even more profit from the businesses, but we just didn't set an annual goal or a quarterly goal or so on and so forth. So if there's something that you don't even have written down, just put it on the chart, and you might find like, oh wow, your spouse thinks that should happen every quarter. You think that should happen annually. Yeah. There's a conversation, right? Or vice versa. If things that you want to bring more into your life, just move them up on the chart.
Yeah.
Right.
A big one that I see right now, having coached business owners for years, is what's the exit plan? How do we get out? When do we get out? What if one person wants to get out sooner than the other? Like, how does that work? So again, just missing conversations around timing and just starting to break it down into these different frequencies, these different time frames. And as you fill it out, it's kind of like a bingo card. Like, just start plopping in things that you are already doing, because what it will reveal to you is, you know what? I really think on a weekly basis. I don't really ever go out quarterly or annually, or certainly not 10 years out. And then there'll be some people who are like, oh yeah, I see 5 and 10 years really clearly. I just don't know what to do tomorrow. Yeah. And so it will just reveal some holes in how you see time and what to do with it, and how you see time together and where each other's strengths are, because I can see the immediate, he can see farther out. Like, there's strength and there's power in that if you can bring those together.
A good example of that, if somebody who sees more immediate maybe is planning the date nights every week or making sure we're going out every week, right? Maybe the other partner is the one planning something like a quarterly getaway, right? Or an annual trip, right? It's just different energy. There's tools inside of the Gary Keller's written about goal setting to the now. There's some nuances that are different from this. For us, this is just an activity to actually figure out what do we do on a regular basis at these different frequencies. And when we see holes in this, we know that a conversation is needed. So the fifth and last C for us, right? The fourth one was Cadence. The fifth C is the Conductor. This is be careful using the phrase, who will we follow, right? Because nobody wants to follow anybody blindly. But the number of times we have been out of alignment inside of our relationship, that we have realized the only way back into alignment is in a particular area of life, that life is feeling out of alignment. We find somebody, some school of thought, or a person, or a way of being, and we adopt that as like, we can both get on board with this, right? If we were in this orchestra on the screen here, we're both willing for the time being to follow this conductor's strategy, right? And so that could show up. I mean, in a way, it's like this takes us to books. If you want to know how our library is built, it is normally because in certain areas of our life, we are saying, you know what? We want to get on the same page. We aren't on the same page. Let's find a conductor. Let's go to a conference. Let's listen to a podcast. Mm-hmm. Let's read a book, and let's figure out who we could follow on this. So I'm thinking of one. I mean, we knew for years, right? 4 daughters. We care a lot about their education. We care a lot about the Mark Twain quote, don't let their schooling interfere with their education. Mm-hmm. And yet, so we both wanted better schooling for them, right? Or something to be fulfilling. We didn't yet have a guide, have a conductor. How did that go?
Yeah, so there came a point where we knew what was going on with their schooling wasn't working. And so you brought this book home, actually, Courage to Grow, from a conference you had gone to. I read it and I'm like, there's something here. Kids read it. We're like, hey, this is something that we can get behind, our kids can get behind. And it actually caused, was the catalyst for us moving to Austin from Baltimore to really be at this school. So again, it doesn't have to be that drastic, but we had to come into alignment around what's the path that we want to take, whose voice do we want to follow in this. This could also be a spiritual thing for some of you. For us, it certainly is. Like, we've got a very strong faith, and for us, it's like there's times where it's like, all right, like that is one authority we will both submit to. From a faith standpoint. Money, like if one of you is looking at Dave Ramsey and the other one's looking at Grant Cardone, like you might have some clashes. Or if one of you goes to one conference and the other doesn't come along and subscribe to it, then there's going to naturally be conflict. So really just looking at where are we going to take direction from in this season, because it may not be for every season, but in the season,
and it cannot be a unilateral decision.
No.
And I think the idea for season really helps. So again, here they are again, kind of all on one screen: the compass, the car wheel, the Clydesdales, Cadence, and the conductor. And the questions that we ask and sort of what we're thinking about is as we go through them: are we feeling drift? Are we feeling friction? Are we feeling turbulence? Are we feeling out of sync? And are we just sort of following different leaders in this season?
Yeah.
So, go.
Yeah. So now what? So what really is the cost of drift? So for Seth and I, we've been married for 25 years, and this didn't happen actually in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For us, it was like year 17, where things came to a head. Seth found himself in the office of a divorce attorney. Here we were building these amazing businesses to give us freedom. And what did it cost us? It almost cost us, well, one, half of our net worth, right? Like, we're about to split everything up. Like, you want the actual numbers? Like, it's actually just going to split everything in half, right? Like, but that's, I mean, at the end of the day, that's actually the least of it, right? Like, it's like, what are you breaking up? What's all of this for if you build this great business and this doesn't last? So what's the cost of the drift? What's the cost of not being in alignment, of getting together and thinking, you know what, I see something in you, like we're better together, going along this road, getting hit with all kinds of stuff. We could give you all kinds of stories. If we had time, I would tell them now, and I don't, but another time I would love to. All the things that we got hit with, that it's like any one of them were enough to probably take us out. But to decide, you know what, we want to be in this together. We want to make this work. And 25 years ago, we couldn't find couples to do life with in this way. We've seen couples, like, when things get bad, they go to counseling and then it's like over. And it's like, well, what's the space between that before things get really bad? Because we're going to have hard days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank goodness we did find some couples along the journey.
We did.
What we found was really hard is that we would luck into them at certain times, but it was hard to find a community where these conversations were happening that didn't feel that felt like it was so pro relationship, but with enough knowledge, right? Not not airy fairy, like, well, just it'll all work out. It it will all work out if you work at it, right?
Yeah.
So there's some involvement for it.
Yeah.
But for us, it's just been this realization that if we're going to succeed as a couple, we will look back and we realize it was never because it was just the two of us and that we were alone in the process.
Yeah. So basically we've created exactly what we would have wanted 25 years ago now, because we want to help couples get ahead more quickly and in community. We actually brought several of these couples together a couple months ago, and one of the greatest compliments that we heard about just the group and what the group really created was, there are so few places that are pro-marriage in these business settings, because it's really easy to go to places right now that'll say, well, if it's not working for you, just bail.
Yeah.
And we're all going to have the hard days. So where are we having those conversations, and with who, and in a way that's going to be generative, and it's going to be a new conversation, not the same old one that you've had before. So
and our encouragement as you're going into the new year would be this: find a community.
Yeah.
Find a community somewhere. We have found this. We found this inside of churches from time to time. We found it inside of coaching groups we were a part of, other organizations. We have been on a search for 25 years now for different communities. What we realized was sort of missing inside of our journey was we wanted two things. We wanted couples that were committed, and we wanted couples that were committed in an entrepreneurial journey together. And when we didn't find like those two things, it was really hard to have a ton of shared experience about the ups and downs of kind of the entrepreneurial roller coaster. And if so, you hear that and you're like, yeah, that is us, and it feels as lonely for you from time to time, or you feel as misunderstood, or you have the same things. I mean, I remember it was hard to talk to our right hand, Katrina. She's amazing, but she didn't want to be the kid that was in the middle of the fight between us, right? Dad. Almost made her quit sometimes, right? We couldn't complain to clients. You couldn't post on social media about it. It's really hard and really lonely if you run a business together and knowing what to do. And we just want to say, if that's you, like, our door's open. That is a conversation that we want to create around that.
So we want to invite you into wherever you might fit in this journey. So discovery, like, hey, I just want to be a part of some different community conversations. And we wanted to make it so accessible. It was just like a no-brainer, like less than the cost of like one counseling session.
Accessible in time and accessible in money.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, because we know you're busy, like you don't have a lot of time to do another thing. But what would it be worth to be in a community of other like-minded couples that are also walking the same exact path as you are?
Yeah. If you find yourself and you're like, yeah, that has been us, but honestly, my spouse just quit their job. Now we're working together and the stakes are higher, right? This is not just like a walk in the park. Like, we are on an adventure, and we need to get there faster. Or we see that the stakes are higher, that if this doesn't work well, we got to rebrand. We have bigger problems than just, we're dabbling in this entrepreneurial journey together. If that's you, we want to talk to you about a more curated journey, right? What we call adventure, right? Where not only do you want to achieve your goals, 4 times faster, right? You want to achieve in a quarter what you would have achieved in a year, and you want to set really targeted quarterly goals, but you want to do it in a much smaller, private, closed cohort of people that have your back as a couple. The number of times we have each gone to individual conferences that I would say had your back, I would say they had my back, but I wouldn't say they had our back.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a way different concept.
Yeah. Yeah. So if either of those speak to you, reach out to us. We want to talk to you about it. And lastly, if you want to go to the level of like, hey, we're leading a team. We've got family involved in the business, and we want to take this again. We want to talk about that as well. All right.
So this is what discovery looks like. Use the code VIP. It's going to give you half off. We've got a great group that's been meeting for months already. We'd love to have you join in. We do one teaching a month, and then we bring in a guest couple from all kinds of different industries that get to share just knowledge and wisdom from over the years and different situations and circumstances. And we've just had some amazing couples, and we've got a great lineup for the next several months already. Again, use that code VIP. You'll get all the recordings from previous ones and get to join into this community. And then if you're interested in the adventure one, go ahead and email us, daily@realignedcouples.com. And we'd love to get you in that. And then if you're like, if you're got the team and you're really ready to go even further with that, go ahead and again, email us, connect with us, connect on social media. I hope you can tell, are so passionate about helping couples that are in business together, not just survive, and whatever even more than thriving is, that. Because again, you didn't get together with your partner to just live this average life. You got together because you believed you could do something amazing in the world together. And we're committed to helping you get there.
Yeah. Either way, we want to wish you all an incredible season that we're in. We think this is a season of reflection. We think this is a season of gratitude, and we think this is a season of fresh starts. And we want to see couples win, and we want to see you win together, and that not at the expense of a relationship did a business have to thrive. So we wish you a wonderful season here, and we'd love to be in touch with you wherever we find you on that journey, and wherever our paths may cross.